Hi, this is Meg Riley. I am at Cactus Pete's Casino in Jackpot, Nevada this morning on a road trip between the Bay Area and Bismarck, North Dakota, where I'll be hanging around Standing Rock for the week as the minister in residence there. And I'm very excited today that we're beginning our mini series of the UUA presidential candidates, starting with Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray. And to co-host this with me is our old friend who's been gone for a while, Tom Schade. Hey, Tom, where are you?
Well, I'm still here in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and in retirement, and happy to be back on The VUU. I've missed you guys.
We have missed you too. Terri?
Hi, so this is Terri Burnor running tech with you all today, and I will be live tweeting this episode. So join us at CLFUU on Twitter and follow along.
You can follow along and tweet yourself. So we're excited to bring all three presidential candidates, and I think we'll not do our usual chatter, though I could talk about the machines here at the casino. Tom, I'm going to kind of put you, Mr. Moderator here.
Oh, thank you.
Kind of hand this off to you, and I'll be chiming in.
Okay, I have had the great pleasure of talking to Susan on an interview which I ran on my blog, and also to moderate a discussion that was held at the New England UUMA retreat. And so Susan and I have talked more than once, and also privately. So I have some questions for her, and the first one's simple, and it requires a yes or no answer. And there's no shilly-shallying about this or obfuscating or euphemism. Have you or any member of your campaign been in touch with Russian intelligence? Oh, she's muted.
No, Tom, absolutely not.
You'll say so under oath?
I will.
We've heard that before.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my first question is really simple. Or my second question is really simple. Is like, how long you've been campaigning for a while, and you've been out and at various panel discussions, and I imagine you're seeing a lot of rank and file UUs, and what are they most concerned about?
Well, you know, Tom, it's really interesting. 8 months ago, we started this campaign talking about the relevancy of liberal religion for this time and the health and vitality of our congregations. And that seemed to be where a lot of focus was. And today we're worried about how to protect our democracy, how to protect religious freedom, how to protect our neighbors, how to effectively bring our values and our moral voice forward in this time. So it's, in a matter of months, it feels like there's a significant shift in how we are thinking about our faith and what we are called to be, who we are called to be in this time.
And that's all post the election?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the election was just a, you know, the issues that we face as a nation, as a planet, haven't changed. Issues of human rights, issues of climate change, these things, the challenges and injustice of mass incarceration, these were all issues that we were facing and have been facing for years. But the context got a lot more difficult, but also a lot clearer. And so, you know, it's that has shifted, and the realization that this moment is urgent. That the work we are preparing ourselves for is both work that is spiritually deep, that we need to be nurturing spiritual communities that help us build moral courage, as well as strengthen the bonds of humanity and compassion, as well as bringing forth our voices more boldly, more bravely, more lovingly to this time.
So what do you see as the role of the UUA president in what is now being called the resistance?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, 9 years ago, I accepted the call to be the lead minister at the UU congregation of Phoenix. At that time, I knew that I would be working on immigration as a piece of the justice work, and I'd actually been working on immigration justice in Youngstown, Ohio previously, so I knew that would be a piece. What I did not know was that I was going to walk into the epicenter of a national crisis and of a swift turn to a national condemning and attack on the immigrant community across the United States. So it was epitomized in Sheriff Joe Arpaio and in SB 1070, a state law essentially legalizing what Arpaio was doing in Maricopa County. And then it quickly spread through copycat legislation across the country. Our capacity as UUs, I mean, I put out the call in that moment for Unitarian Universalists across the country to come join the struggle and to learn from what was happening in Arizona. And over 2 years, thousands and thousands of Unitarian Universalists showed up bravely and boldly and lovingly to combat SB 1070, to resist Sheriff Joe Arpaio. We showed up in a way that no other faith community showed up. That's who we are. And we demonstrated that and we learned from that. And on election night, as many of us were in shock at what happened with the national election, Sheriff Joe Arpaio was defeated here in Arizona. And Unitarian Universalists had a role in that work. We were not the leaders, but we fortified the movement. We came in at critical moments and we were in the battle for the long haul, and we made a significant change in the politics of Arizona, which was our promise in 2010 and again in 2012 when we came for the Justice GA. So I think, you know, for the UUA president, that type of leadership, that capacity to see opportunities where our faith voice can make a difference and we can walk more faithfully our religion, our theology of universalism, our commitment to one another, naming those opportunities and calling us to them, that is one of the key roles of the UUA president, to be that prophetic voice, that national voice for our faith and our values.
But part of the reason why your role was so significant there in Phoenix was that there was one issue that was right there in front of you. As the UUA president, there's a dozen, 20 issues that call for our immediate witness and 100% commitment. And of course, we can't do that. So how would you see the process by which you would not diffuse yourself and the UUA staff across the breadth of the issues that confront us now that are part of the resistance?
Mm-hmm. So Bill Sinkford told me once that he thought when he was elected as UUA president that racial justice would be the focus of his justice work and of his ministry in the UUA, his leadership as president, and then marriage equality erupted in a way where there was a clear opportunity for us to shine with our values, to shine as a faith community, answering the call to love, working for GLBT equality. So, I think while there are dozens and dozens of issues, there are also moments of opportunity where our voice can make a clear difference. And so one of the things the president's job is to be strategic. It's important for us to ask, where can our voice make a difference where there aren't other faith communities showing up? Where are we especially privileged or especially positioned to be, because of our partnerships, because of previous work, because of the moment and the way that we often stand further ahead than other faith traditions, closer to the radical edge. Those are the decisions I think the president makes. There's a really strong critique of progressivism that we try to do too much, and so we do nothing very effectively. we need to have a clear and compelling mission, and we need to choose the justice issues that help us live into that mission. So here in Arizona, I mean, yes, immigration, obviously context was a piece of it, living at ground zero of the immigration movement, as well as the beginnings of a, unbelievably inhuman attack on the immigrant community. But we also had a vision here in Phoenix of growing as a multicultural, multiracial, religious community. So the partnerships we chose, the way we engaged the immigration justice issue by following undocumented leaders of color, those choices were also about who we were called to be as a religious community. So I think it's the same with the UUA president, that you have a clear vision of who we are called to be as UUs, and we choose our issues and our partners and our strategies based on what helps us move forward in that vision of the future for our faith and for our country. I think you may be muted.
I want to go back to what people were interested in the beginning of your campaign, the health and vitality of our congregations, because I think that has a lot to do with how effective we're going to be in this new era. And a lot of UU congregations are very divided over the processes of cultural change that they need to go through in their congregation, around worship style, around music, around the role of religious education and worship, around decision-making processes, around social justice, around a lot of those issues. And when I look at what we might be able to do, I think that in some cases our weakness is that so many of our congregations are caught up in these fights at this point and have not resolved themselves around there. What role do you think that the UUA president has in promoting cultural change in our congregations? And is that a place that you would have the effective tools to actually do that work?
Mm-hmm. So making sure that our congregations are equipped for the changing landscape of the 21st century and for spiritual vitality and health in our congregations for the 21st century, the way the UUA president can affect that is working, ensuring that congregational life staff, the people who work directly with our congregations, are equipped with the resources to provide our congregations and to give them tools for what helps congregations live into greater health and vitality and mission. I was just at the Pacific Northwest District Assembly. Out here in the West, we do have 4 districts still with regional collaboration. And there was a great program on how to get it right from the beginning that was led by regional staff that was talking about things like behavioral covenant, clear sense of mission, clear processes, how to deal with conflict, having covenants of right relationship. They were providing the tools, showing congregations from the beginning, how do you put some strong things in place that help the congregation move forward in strength from the beginning. So, for me, the most important thing, and really early on in this campaign, the UUA Board of Trustees asked the candidates, in 6 years, what would you want to see? One thing you would want to see different across our faith. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want to see our faith, our people, our communities feel a sense of calling. Mm-hmm. So one of the challenges for us as Unitarian Universalists, we have a beautiful theology, an incredible ministry to offer at this time. But because we don't have we're not all theists. That understanding of calling is hard for us. And so we can get stuck in personalities. We can look at our congregations in a really flat way, thinking about how do we make everyone happy? How are we going to meet everyone's preferences? And so that's the way we get stuck on these issues of worship change or governance change. We get stuck in personalities and trying to please people, when the real question is, how are we going to make a difference in this world? How are we going to best live our values? How are we going to welcome more people into this tradition? And I think when we start with that mission question, it makes the cultural change easier. Now, there's always grief with change. Change is always difficult. But when you know why you're making the change, when you know that the reason you're making the change is because you want to see a better world for your children, for your community, that helps more people get in, go with the change, be open to it. So I think that sense of mission is what the president can bring, as well as, ensuring that regional staff have the tools to share with congregations about how to build healthy, vibrant, vital ministries.
Just one more question, and then I think Meg has one. If you think the role of the UUA president is to be able to articulate our mission in such a way that it inspires people to move past the personality-based, grief-based conflicts around change in our congregations, how would you articulate that mission in 2-3 sentences right now?
Can you say that again, Tom, because the audio cut out?
Okay. How would you articulate that mission that you think is that you would hope inspire congregations to move beyond the fake fights that they're in right now? How would you do that? Really, just show me. Just show me how you'd say that. What's the language you would use?
Our faith is being called to be spiritual communities for our time. Religiously plural, radically inclusive, and justice-centered. And the mission of the UUA is to equip our congregations to live into that multicultural, multi-generational, religious community grounded in love and justice.
Okay. Meg, you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing you talking about the prophetic role, and of course, part of what that means to the UUA president is about how staffing resources are deployed. Anything we've been successful in has taken more than the president's statements. And one of our viewers asked what you would do to encourage greater accessibility among UUs, including not just wheelchair users, but all disabled people, including and supporting ministries for UUs with mental health issues. And I know there was a time when we had a staff person, Devorah Greenstein, who worked on disability issues. And, money comes and goes and staff comes and goes, and that's as it should be. But I'm curious if you've thought about how you would staff the public witness for strategic action, because well, frankly, I'll be honest, a lot of what I built was dissembled. So, and that's what happens with administration changes, but I'm curious if you've thought about the staffing.
Let me first answer your question by saying the president's most important job, or at least right there with the prophetic voice, is fundraising for the resources to live the ministry and the mission that we are being called to. Even in my own congregation, I see my role is raising the resources for the staff to be well compensated, well prepared, and equipped for their job and have the resources they need to live our mission. So the board and the congregation articulate the mission, and I help raise the resources to make that mission real. So, the most important thing the president can do is be committed and effective at fundraising for the ministry we're being called to. And then, there were a couple other pieces of your question about, but it starts with we have to increase the resources and the revenues to the UUA. We do not have an expense problem, we have an income problem. And that is where we need to begin. And then there are strategic decisions about staffing and where we need more staffing, but we have to raise the resources for that. The UUA budget hasn't changed significantly in 10 years, but we know that costs go up. Personnel costs, the cost of doing business, running the association go up. So that means we've had many, many cuts. So I'm committed to being dedicated to fundraising around a clear and compelling mission for our association so that we can then staff it. For the question of accessibility, there were two questions, accessibility and justice. So I just want to share a couple of thoughts and stories that I have with accessibility. You know, one of the areas where this is not a full answer to the question, but one of the places that I see the needs for greater inclusiveness in our communities is with a mindfulness around neurodiversity and mental health diversity in our communities. So we see this a lot in children's ministry. And from conversations that I've had with others around the country, I think this is something not just happening in Phoenix. Increasingly, we need to think about how to create religious community for our children that really welcomes all of our children and that takes into consideration kids with a variety of needs and with neurobiological diversity. So that's an issue of inclusiveness and accessibility that is, we've made significant progress here in Phoenix on that, and I'd like to see that across our congregations. To the issues of justice, so Meg, I am so grateful for your vision and leadership in really creating Standing on the Side of Love. And there was in Arizona, when SB 1070 was passed, there was a confluence of things. I mean, I've been working on immigration even before coming to Arizona. It was an issue close to President Peter Morales' heart. And then we had the tools of Standing on the Side of Love. So we showed up organized, all in our t-shirts, and the resources of Standing on the Side of Love helped amplify nationally what was happening locally. So all UUs around the country could feel a part of it. To see that, you know, and we're going to need more of that. We're going to need to have more resources around that organizing, and that organizing that supports the work of our local congregation, like what's happening in Bismarck, like the leadership of our UU congregation in Bismarck. You know, being able to come in those moments when, like I said to Tom earlier, when our voice is needed, is critical, and amplifying and amplifying and fortifying the work of local congregations. That's a key thing that the UUA can do, and I want to see us be thinking about how do we provide more resources for that kind of organizing, especially now, now more than ever.
Talking about fundraising,
yeah.
Basically there's three sources, as I understand it. There's the money that comes from congregations, the money that comes from a larger network of smaller donors, and then our large donor program. Where do you think that we're the weakest, and where do you think that there's the room for the most improvement and the possibility for the most improvement among those three? Of course, we want money from anybody.
Right. Right. There's also the Common Endowment Fund. I would lift that up too as a source of resources. I mean, one of the ways that we've grown here in Phoenix, our budget is both by individual giving and pledging, but over my time here, we've doubled the size of our endowment, and that's also made a huge difference in our resources for our mission and ministry. So it's about relationship. You know, I think the fundraising is about relationship and about being able to inspire people around a mission and show clear and measurable impact that their giving is making. So I want to see the UUA be in stronger and better relationship with all of our local congregations. I think APF is a place where there is a potential for growth. And the UUA is trying to figure out a way to improve relationships and connection with local congregations, as well as the way we fund the annual program fund, which is the gifts of the local congregations to the UUA. So I think there's already work there, but that is a key place where we haven't grown income to the association, even as our congregation budgets have grown. But I think the UUA needs to strengthen its relationship with the congregations and show clear and measurable impacts for our congregations in being partnered and giving generously to the UUA. It's important to be able to ask. It's important to be able to articulate what difference a gift will make. to the association. How someone's generosity to the association will result in healthier congregations, will result in a more just world, will result in the relevance of our faith in the larger world.
That's interesting, because to me, I mean, just my own opinion on this is that congregations have so many financial pressures on them already. And they are trying to do more with either the same or less in many cases. And that I have always thought that the place to go was to the broader network of smaller donors, people who could give, you know, $1,000, $2,000 a year to the UUA over and above their local congregational pledges. And that always has seemed to be an underdeveloped source, though I am getting more emails these days from Mary Catherine Moore. So apparently that is, you know, coming up in the world.
Yeah, I think, and I agree with you, Tom, that that's really important. That was where I was talking about not just to large donors, but also to generous people in a mid-range that can give to the association. It's still about articulating how their giving to the UUA is going to make a difference on behalf of their values. So I think that's right. But you know, and there are the financial constraints. Absolutely, that's. I mean, we see that in Arizona and elsewhere. But there are also trends where membership isn't growing, but but congregational budgets are in some places growing, and so we do. You know, I think it depends. Each congregation faces a little bit different reality financially.
Probably that's a regional thing as well. You know, where how independently and old their congregations are.
Right. Well, and here's another thing: equipping our congregations for the way that fundraising is changing. You know, fundraising is really different, and it's different because of the economic shifts in our country, where you have more and more people who are just who have almost no wealth, and you have more wealth among a smaller group. The competition for charitable dollars has grown exponentially in a way that changes the landscape for congregational fundraising. So the other piece is, how do we better equip our congregations to fundraise so that they're able to fund the ministries they're called to. That's, you know, I think that's another piece that we should not forget, because if our congregations are healthy and vital, that is going to strengthen the UUA's health and vitality. Whereas if the UUA is healthy and vital, but our congregations are really struggling, we won't grow, because it's in our congregations where people find Unitarian Universalism and where our faith is really lived.
Most of our congregations are still in this kind of indentured servitude model of fundraising, where you agree in advance to owe them. You know, you take on a debt to the congregation every year, and then you know, which I don't think fits the way most people handle their money now, especially younger people, and especially with the level of insecurity in the economy, people are very loath to take on debts, you know, that they may not be able to have. Do you, switching subjects, do you think, how would you evaluate how the UUA staff is deployed? And do you think there needs to be adjustments in that?
There's a couple key areas that stand out for me. And one of them is around communication. So communication is another area that has changed significantly in the last few years. And we have, you know, in our congregation, we have folks where if we don't paper mail it to their homes through the US mail, they won't see the message. And we have other folks who don't even may not have computers, they just have a cell phone. So they need it in a mobile format. They need the message in a mobile format. So communication is an area that probably takes more resources than we realize. And I think it's an area where the UUA is providing some good resources, but communicating them so that people are aware of them is still a challenge. And the way people communicate is really changing. So that's an area where where I would like to see us strengthen our capacity to communicate with our congregations, members, and leaders more effectively. The other thing, and it could, and I don't want to promise big things, because the first key thing is raising the resources to increase what we're doing. But communication is an area where I see we need growth and better skills. The second thing is around the social justice work and how are we going to support our congregations, like in North Carolina, like in Bismarck, North Dakota, that are really showing leadership for our whole faith, and figuring out how to amplify that work so that all UUs can feel a part of it and can support it, and that those ministers and those congregations feel supported by the larger UUA is a place where we need to find the resources to put behind organizing strategies. I took really bold actions here in Arizona, chaining myself in an act of civil disobedience to the jail to stop neighborhoods from being raided and families from being separated. And there was certainly not unanimity in the congregation. There was broad support for resisting Sheriff Arpaio's unconstitutional and inhumane policies and policing. But the fact that the UUA took notice and came was incredibly important for, for supporting that work, right? It made a difference to members of the congregation to see how proud the UUA was and that they came in to support. When we, first and foremost, we are religious communities, and our best justice work comes from a place of religious and spiritual health. So even in all that justice work, we were working on the health of community and spiritually vital worship. But when you do stand out on the edge, it's difficult. It can be difficult in the congregation. And so the UUA's support in those times is critical. It can really help a congregation shine in those moments and continue to grow in health, even as they take risks and walk along an edge of discomfort.
So you think, what I'm hearing you saying is you think there needs to be more staff that's available for supporting local congregations who are on the radical edge in those situations where that happens, or that's basically.
I think there needs to be more staff to help amplify the work of our local congregations. The UUA might not do the work. We need to be careful not to do things that local congregations do, but how do we amplify, share it, and support it? Sometimes it might be justice. Sometimes it could be a crisis where it's trauma response and pastoral leadership that comes in. There's all kinds of resources where I think all kinds of ways that we need to boost and help congregations in critical moments. So, what about congregations that are doing really innovative ministries and are stuck at a 400 number because they really need that second minister? And they're, how can the UUA help in a one-time way that's going to help them grow to that next level? So I do mean it in the organizing strategy around justice, but I think it also applies in many areas where the UUA can be thinking about critical moments in the lives of congregations and how we can make an investment that's going to move those congregations forward to greater health, greater impact.
What do you think is the role of volunteer, non-staff, non-professional people who work in close organizational ties to staff people are? I mean, my model is the UUMA, where I work many hours a month for nothing, because the professional staff has brought me into an organized way to assist the work of the UUMA, and I work with, under the direction of the staff. I'm a staff volunteer staff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that much of that at the UUA level, that the staff doesn't have that kind of, hasn't built those volunteer forms around them. Do you think that's a possibility? And is that someplace where also community ministry and those kinds of missional work beyond congregations can be brought closer in to work?
I do. I think it's a huge opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity of regionalization. So I know, again, change is always difficult. So the move to regionalization is challenging. But what I see, and this is so important. This is about the governance changes we need to make to be organized for impact. But, getting folks out of governance work, there are people who love governance work and they are critical. But a lot of people want to make a difference. They want to do the ministry aspects of our faith. So I can see the regional staff, let's say the regional staff person who holds stewardship in their region. How can they pull together a team of ministers, community ministers, lay people who have really strong skills around stewardship and help deploy them across the region? Right? I can see regional staff creating ministry teams rather than board structures and budgets and all those kinds of things. Create ministry teams. Multiculturalism, the staff person that holds multiculturalism. How are they pulling in leaders from the congregations that are doing that work into a team that, again, can be deployed and can provide resources and work directly with congregations on multicultural growth? So I think it's a huge opportunity. I hope that it is the next step as we, move people out of board work for their districts into ministry work for the congregations in the faith. Yes, huge opportunity.
It was one of the more, well, just frankly, boring things I've ever done in my life. They call it board for a reason.
Yeah, some people are called to it, but most, but that's a small group, I think.
One of the things I think as I look over the whole kind of UU, ecosphere, one of the things that I think is very new is, and it's not really new, but it's really taking on stronger and stronger manifestation, is non-congregational groups of UUs that are joined together by a common identity, that are not in congregations, they're not regents, they're not staff, they're not board, they're not thing. I'm thinking of Black Lives of UU, right? Where does that, in our organization chart, there's no place for it, right? There's no box that corresponds to that, and yet that's where a lot of leadership is coming from. And as we try to move out of really old New England, nonprofit, white, waspy organizational structures, how does and you're now in charge of the staff and working on implementing the goals to set, out of the political process, the board. How do you see working, folding these kinds of groups more into the actual work than they have been? And how does that change our way of working? And isn't that change necessary in order to become a different kind of religious movement?
So I think it's about partnership. So until the organizational structure makes some significant change to be organized for clear impact and effectiveness, we may have to work with just partnership and seeing some of these, partnering with some of these groups for larger ministry, as well as seeing the leadership development, because I think you're absolutely right that in Black Lives of UU, and in Drum, in various groups, in various ways that Unitarian Universalism is manifesting itself in new forms, those are all leadership development platforms. So when we're thinking about leadership at the UUA, from the board level, from, I think it's important that staff, certainly the president, have listening circles, that partnership is a key piece of how we live our faith, that we're not just trusting the knowledge we have in our own experience, but that we are in conversation with partners, even UU partners who are outside the staff of the UUA, creatively thinking about how we're being called. So I think, it might be at the beginning, informal partnerships where we're listening and we're talking. When Trump was elected, Donald Trump was elected, one of the first things I did was a few days, started calling the organizers I know who are not UUs. How are you seeing this moment? What's just to break out of kind of parochial borders that have confined our faith. But I think then we need to grow into seeing how are there more formal ways that we are collaborating in partnership or see these organizations as part of the overall UUA structure. Right now, our structure is pretty cumbersome, so I'm committed to helping us clarify it, make it more simple, and then I think you can expand it. But first of all, you've first got to get clarity. I think you're muted again.
So what surprised you so far in the campaign? And what's disappointed you?
One thing, I don't know if this is surprising, but I really am finding a lot of joy seeing our congregations across the country, meeting with leaders across the country, hearing what people are excited about, as well as hearing the challenges in congregations. That's been a real gift that I'm grateful for. So I don't know if I expected that to be the gift that it has been. What was the second thing? That was surprise, and you're muted again.
What disappointed you, he asked.
Oh. So I sometimes think that the way Unitarian Universalist operates on the national level is that we confuse the process for the mission and we forget the larger mission because we get ourselves all invested in the process. So, a 2-year presidential campaign for a 6-year position is a whole lot of resources. It's a lot for all 3 of the candidates to invest when only one of us will be the president. It surprised me the way that the politics of our process impacts our mission. Takes us, we focus on that rather than, and for 2 years. It's not that we shouldn't be focused on it, but it's just such a long time to invest in a process for a president who's going to be there 6 years and it's going to be somebody else. To me, we do this in a lot of ways where we put the process as primary and the debate and the discussion and the political challenge. And meanwhile, the world is going on and needs our message, needs our leadership in partnership. So it does disappoint me. But we're capable of doing it differently. I also see the opportunity and I see some readiness for change, which excites me. That may be another piece of the surprise, is that I have really seen readiness for change. I had someone in Chicago ask me, could we make GA less painful? General Assembly less painful? I think, yes, we can. But I do see this readiness for change, which excites me.
I'll ask a question from a viewer. So a number of seminarians these days, I'm sure you've met them, they're not interested in congregational ministry. They're interested in chaplaincy and entrepreneurial ministry and other forms. And of course, we have so many community ministers already. I think I neglected at the beginning to send out massive love to Ron Robinson and Turley, Oklahoma, where a fire has devastated their community building this morning.
Oh,
He's
no.
been doing I know he's been doing amazing ministry there, and from Emerson on back, it's the community ministers often who have the bigger names. I'm curious how you think we could better support these other forms of ministry, and also, that I know that kind of the understanding of what covenanted community means has shifted already some, but do you see that shifting more? And
yeah, so I think there's vision within congregations that can better support community ministry, as well as vision within regions and areas where congregations can partner to support community ministry. In Phoenix, so we have someone who's graduated from seminary, hasn't yet seen the MFC, really sat on the fence for a while, maybe still sits on that fence. Is congregational ministry my call? And the person hasn't been turned on by congregational ministry, but we've created a ministry position for justice and pastoral ministries, which is very much, it's Emrys Staton is the person who works for us. And when the first deportation was happening under President Trump, Emrys Staton was one of the ones who did everything he could and took arrests to try to stop that mother from being separated from her kids, right? And so, his work is to nurture those partnerships, help bring our congregation out into the community. And some of the pastoral care work that he does isn't just here in the congregation, but providing spiritual care to justice activists. So how can we push beyond the walls of the congregation to realize that our mission and ministry is calling us, and we need to provide resources to staff that kind of work? So I'd love to see partnerships between community ministers and congregations, and ways that congregations can support community ministry, knowing that that's providing our values in the larger world to people who've never heard of Unitarian Universalism. So I think there's growth to do in the local congregation around seeing our mission beyond our walls, as well as opportunities in communities to partner, to provide the resources to come together to provide kinds of community ministries.
Yeah, so the community ministers, I was in the entrepreneurial ministry class that the UUMA and the UUA jointly put on the last 2 years. And the tragedy is there are these amazing people with great visions for ministry that aren't connected to congregations directly, though of course they are. And there's really no funding mechanism. CLF, which struggles with funding in our own way, and by the way, we always appreciate donations from everyone. But CLF we have staff. So many of them were just trying to get enough money for these ministers to carry out their vision. And there's really no mechanism at all for that. Have you thought about how to support these these amazing visions that people have that are kind of hanging out beyond congregational walls?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I don't have all the answers.
No, I know. It would be
but I do want to name that. And I am, something that I think I bring strongly to leadership is the capacity to listen, and that by listening, more creativity emerges. So I want to name that. The reason why I said congregations beginning to see their ministry beyond the walls is because congregations are a source of stable fundraising, right? They are the sources that are best positioned potentially to help provide financial support for community ministers. I'm not saying that's the end, but that is the place where I've seen it. That's the place where I've tried to live it in Phoenix, and that is the place where we have the stable resources. So really is the question that our congregations need to see their ministries different. When people are saying, I don't want to be in our congregations, there's different levels to understand that so how are we going to unlock our faith to see it beyond institutional maintenance, the real mission?
I mean, there's such an inherent contradiction between asking the congregation to be the main funding source for community ministry, because the congregation is all, I mean, its first priority is maintenance of itself. And, I mean, other churches, other denominations have, mission boards, et cetera, where they actually have a funding stream that doesn't go through congregations and doesn't come from congregations, so they collect money across the board. But a lot of that is individual donations, et cetera, to directly employ mission, evangelical, outreach, church planting, all of those kinds of things. Somewhere we need to be able to find, I think, some funding mechanism that isn't routed through the congregation, because I think that puts we need to go around it. Does that make sense to you? I know this, I'm just spitballing here.
Right, I know. I mean, we do have the funding panel, which provides resources, although maybe not directly to community ministers, but if they're building a ministry, it can provide some funding. So we do have some of that. The first thing you said was congregations are primarily in the business of taking care of their institutions, and I disagree. I think the institutions are tools to live our mission in the world, and that, if we're maintaining an institution that's not making a clear and measurable impact in people's lives and in the larger community, why maintain that institution? So, and I think that if we can get more mission focused, we can find the resources to fund new and creative ways of doing ministry. Resources are available. I had a fundraiser tell me that there is greater capacity than the churches have ever figured out how to ask for or use. So it's about learning, it's about having bold visions that are going to require people to, be more generous. If there's ever been a time to be more generous for Unitarian Universalism, it's now. So,
Susan, people talk about elevator speeches about Unitarian Universalism. Joanna Crawford said years ago, and I thought it was great, other faiths have testimonials, not elevator speeches. So I would love to hear your personal testimonial. How has Unitarian Universalism transformed or saved you?
I think I told Tom this story. Unitarian Universalism, the UU congregation I grew up in, saved my life when I was about 5 years old. My mom became a feminist. She worked on the Equal Rights Amendment. It's actually what got us to Unitarian Universalism, because she was invited to come to the UU church and speak about the ERA and gather signatures. And she said, what kind of church is inviting a woman to come speak and do this? And they found a home there. But their marriage went through a huge transition in a renegotiation of responsibilities and roles, and that wasn't easy. And so there were many years that were just tense as they were figuring out and whether or not they could make those transitions together. And for me, the church was Elliott Chapel in St. Louis, was a place of joy and security and love. I remember my kindergarten teachers, Tim Gardner and BJ Limegrubler, who were, it was a second marriage for BJ, and they were so happy together. And for me, it was like a different way of seeing marriage. And that, I wouldn't be here in the world the way I am without that congregation. So, we support families and children through the changes of life. We're a community where we don't all believe the same thing, but we are working together to learn how to love more deeply and to care more deeply about our world and to grow as caring and thoughtful and people living in a beloved community.
So why do you want to be president?
Well, for me, it's not really about want. It's about the fact that this calling has grabbed hold of my heart in a way that hasn't let go. When we closed Justice General Assembly in Phoenix, Arizona, when we stood outside of Sheriff Arpaio's jail in that candlelight vigil, and I could feel the way that walking faithfully in our values, that living our faith in action, when I could see what could happen when we were clear about mission and willing to let go of the way we've always done things in order to make a difference, how powerful that was in the community, in the impact it made in Phoenix, but also in the impact it made in our own hearts. That's when I began to think about larger leadership for our association. I think this is in a moment of incredible urgency and opportunity. We are ready to move past the way we've always done things. We are ready to reach out beyond our own walls in broader coalition, which is a way to change ourselves and be a part of making a difference in the world. And I believe that we can do it. I've seen us do it, and I want to be a part of helping us move forward, being spiritually vital, grounded in partnership, and organized for impact.
Well, thank you. You know, Tom already said, and I just want to echo what a huge gift it is for all three of you who are spending a very significant amount of time and energy on behalf of the larger association. It is no small thing. I know that each precious person wants to tell you each precious idea, and that it's a lot on top of a church ministry and a family. So I really want to thank you for that. We're going to have the other two candidates, Jean Pupke on the 23rd of March and Allison Miller on the 30th of March, coming to talk with us as well. Next week, we'll have Keith Cron coming to talk about what's going on with ministerial search this year. That's always an interesting trends kind of conversation. Tom, was there anything you had your long list of questions? Was there anything you didn't get to ask?
No, I'm happy and satisfied. I'm always impressed whenever I talk to any of these candidates. And as someone who has not made up my mind, I am also the kind of person who is like, right at this point, you know, I'm ready to endorse. But once I talk to Allison, I'll probably change my mind. And once I talk to Jean, I am that kind of person who likes the last person I talk to, because I'm so taken by people's and your passion, clarity, commitment. And I would just want to echo to Meg, what Meg said, that putting yourself forward into this is a huge gift to others and a huge sacrifice in your own life. And I imagine that there's days that it seems very burdensome and other days that it must be just glorious. And so I wish you the best, and thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Anything, Susan, that you wish we'd asked that you quickly want to say before we go? Like, what? They didn't ask about? I don't know.
I don't know, but now more than ever, we're called to be a bold and vital voice for love and justice. Let's get to that work.
Yeah, and to that. And like Tom, I feel like all three of you are very impressive, as is the campaign itself. That, you know, having just lived through this horrific United States campaign and seeing just how ugly it can all get, it's just a pleasure to be with people who are actually talking about their ideas and their visions and what they would do and being transparent. And so I feel very, very lucky to be part of a democratic movement at this point in history. So thanks to all of you who joined us, and we will see you next time.
All right. Be well.
Be well.
Take good care.
Thank you.